All right. Quote of the day. Great people do things before they are ready. They do things before they know they can do it. Doing what you're afraid of, getting out of your comfort zone, taking risks. That's what life is. By Amy Poehler. It's a good one, Amy. Out in the garage today, gonna work on squaring up this K-member. So I'm not gonna go through the steps of it. I ended up looking up on YouTube and watching one from Eric the Car Guy. He did a pretty good how-to on how to square up your K-member. But my biggest thing I had was, it said you're supposed to use the bolt for the rear control arm. Well, I got this all up in place. It's hard to get up in place, not taking it down. So I ended up finding a way to kind of drape the string for the plumb bob over like the bushing or sleeve for this forward mounting point on this subframe. And I got my tape stuck to the floor with my dots. So I did that at all four corners here. And then on the front here, you go off of this hole in the K-member, if you can see it there. Maybe you can't see it very good, but there's a little hole in the K-member there. So I hung the plumb bob through there, and you can see I got tape on both sides. Can maybe see it there. I got tape on both sides for the rear. So next is measuring from there on each side and kind of square it up for the wheelbase. And then the step after that is squaring it up from side to side. I had a buddy over here yesterday helping me out with a few things. We were kind of looking at some stuff with the bucket seats here. I do have an email out to Planted. I think it's Planted or Planted Technologies. They make seat brackets and the side mount brackets for this. So they make a bracket that mounts the seat to the floor, and then you mount the side mount brackets up from the bracket from the floor to the seats. So I got an email out to them, and they did email me back with some measurements. So I'm comparing that to what the Corbeau seat brackets are. But I'm almost thinking now to get the seats low enough to the floor so that I have headroom inside the car, especially just not only just sitting in the car, like with that bracket with the slider, my head's pretty much like the hair in my head's rubbing on the headliner. So I'm afraid even taking the slider out and having a little bit lower bracket, that's what it'll take just to get me far enough away from the floor. But I'm kind of wondering if their bracket will still keep the seat up too high in the car. So I'm thinking I'll order the side mount brackets that go like from the bracket to the side mounts on the seat. As you can see, there's a little bolt on each side of the seat there. But I might order those side mounts and then build my own brackets off of the floor, just so that I can keep that seat low enough in the car. So I was kind of talking through that with my buddy, and we ended up, and I think on the last update that I recorded, I used the plumb bob and set up some tape spots on the floor. And Maximum Motorsports was definitely right. It was a lot easier to do with a second set of hands and go between these dots and measure everything. But after doing all that, I must be a super genius, just the way I had this thing set in there. And I say that jokingly, but I was sitting at 73 1/4 side to side, and 80 and about 1.5/16 from corner to corner, just from what we had measured. And I went back and double checked. The front spots were still in the same spot, so I think the back one should have been. But then I hung the plumb bob on there, but I must not have hung it in the same spot on one side. So I came over to the other side, hung the plumb bob here, and made sure it still lined up with the tape dot. And it was pretty good on this side. So I don't know what I was doing before. So I'm to say the least, I think I'm doing pretty good with where this K-member is at. And the other guy, Eric the car guy that I watched on YouTube, he said to go through and drill a hole in the bottom of the K-member here so that it lines up with your frame rail. And he suggested doing like an 1/8 inch hole. I think I'm going to do a 1/4 inch hole. Shouldn't really affect the integrity of things too much, so that once we do have the engine on there, we can still line it up and use a bigger punch or a drill bit or something and kind of pop it through the hole to make sure that that K-member is all lined up once we have an engine set on it. Next thing is, look at that. No more engine stand in the corner. Here's the engine stand here. Yeah, I do have a mess out here. And we ended up dropping the engine on the floor, just using the good old cast iron F-150. It's a little wobbly here, but I think it should be okay. But we ended up setting it on the floor, just using some 2x6s, 2x4s, stacking them up underneath the stock cast iron manifolds. And I drug out the QuickTime bell housing. I don't know if I'd mentioned this before, I bought this used from someone else. So I wanted to make sure this bugger fit up on here right. And it looks like I should be doing pretty good. All the bolt holes line up. So that's the main thing I wanted to see. Should clean that up a little, but it's going to be in the car and not really going to see it anyway. So my next thing is, I didn't have hardware for this, so I'm going to go through, make sure I can get all the hardware that I need and get this bugger bolted up, try it out, pull that flex plate off, put that engine plate on there too, and make sure everything is gonna fit up right. And then work on getting that together, getting that set in the car. Get some ARP bolts for that, and then I think I'm gonna pop off the front rear hubs. Get some of the nice longer ARP bolts for that. Get these stock studs pressed out and get some ARP studs pressed in. Then I still do have to drill out the spindle here to accept the big huge bolts that bump steer kits have. So I'll go from there. Alright, I was just dinking around out here tonight, and I do have my good hubs and the rear hubs sitting there under the bench, but I want to pop these original like OE type of studs out of there and put in some nice longer ARP studs. So I thought, well, I don't have a press or anything. I do have the little bench vise, and I have scrap steel. So all I did was cut up a piece of angle iron and some square tubing. Just tacked it on there. And then just set it in the vise here. I can't balance it and the camera. But yeah, anyway, just set that in the vise like so. And then, of course, set the hub in here like so with this into the stud and between the pieces on the angle iron there. So it just sits in the vise like so. And it has just enough oomph out of my little dinky little vise here that it actually pushes those studs out. So just need, of course, to get it past the knurling on the little stud there, and then it all just pops right out. But I was practicing on the old hubs that came off of the spindles that have bead blasting elements and everything in them, and the one bearing did fall apart when I went to pull it out, so they were shot. But that'll be another one of the next things, is getting some nice long ARP wheel studs ordered, getting those pressed out, and getting the new ones pressed in. But I thought I'd just show my fancy little homemade device, free. Didn't have to buy a press or anything. or bug a friend about borrowing one or taking it over there and getting stuff set up. Actually worked really slick.